Hello there, my name is Thomas O'Regan, and over the last 3.5 years, me and my wife have built an 11 property portfolio. I consider myself a professional property investor, and I do this full time for a living now, which I'm very lucky to be in that position. I don't work a full time job anymore. I just invest in property full time. Now, what I wanted to talk about today is something it's a very simple thing, but a lot of people don't understand it. They don't comprehend how it actually works, and it's much easier to understand once you've done it once, then it all makes sense. But basically, that is equity. So, what is equity? Equity is the difference between what you own on the property, if you're buying property for as debt versus what the property is worth. So typically the banks want you to have at least 20% ownership of the property. So when you buy the property, ideally what the banks want is they want you to put in a 20% deposit. But the reality is you can put a much less deposit in. You could put like a 5% deposit, you can put a 10% deposit. If you go to those lower levels, you will need to pay lender's mortgage insurance. But that's not really what I want to talk about today. I just want to make sure I'm explaining to you guys what equity is. So whether you put in the 5% deposit, the 10% deposit, or the 20% deposit, when you buy the property, that is your ownership, that is your equity in the property. Say, for example, if you buy $1 million property and you put down a 5% deposit, and that is $50,000, your equity within the $1 million property will be $50,000. Great. Now, if you put in a 10% deposit when the property settles into your name, you will have put down $100,000 on $1 million property. That is $100,000 of equity that you will have in that property that you put in from your own money, and so on and so on. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So, what equity is it is the difference between the value of the property in the marketplace, the difference between the value of the property in the marketplace and how much money you own on it. So let's just go back to that example and say we put down a 10% deposit on $1 million property. So therefore you have a $900,000 loan and you have $100,000 in the property. You have a 10% equity stake in the property. Now, what would happen if the property doubled to $2 million? Now you wouldn't have a 10% stake in the property. You would have like more than a 50% stake in the property, because the property has doubled to $2 million. And obviously, for a property double, it takes a bit of time. It doesn't obviously happen overnight unless you're very lucky. But so here's the thing. If the property was $2 million and you bought it for $1 million and your loan just stayed the same the entire time at what did we say it was? $900,000. Your new equity position would be $1.1 million because the property's doubled. Okay, so like I'll just get into a bit of leverage now, but leverage is the difference between how much money you put in versus how much you get out in a return. Okay, so you're making a very good return on your money there. If you're putting in $100,000, the property doubles. It's not like you're 2 times your money, 3 times your money, 4 times your money. You're literally like 10 times in your money or more, a little bit more. But my point is, equity is the difference between the value of the property and how much money you owe for debt on the property. That is what equity is. And again, this is where a lot of people get it wrong. Property prices can go up and they can go down. So I see a lot of people and they say, I've got a lot of equity in my property, and then it gets to the point where they want to use the equity to either buy another property or whatever, and then they go to use it, but they can't because they haven't released it yet. So it's in your best interest, if you're a property investor or if you have some equity, to get the equity released, okay? Because you can't use it unless it's released. And you would do that through refinancing. You would put it in like a redraw account, or I would suggest like an offset account here in Australia. You can get an offset account, and basically that is an account that you can have all your equity sitting in as cash essentially, and you can use it to do whatever you want with it. I recommend using it to invest in more property, but the reality is you can do whatever you want with it. But unless you get that offset account and get the equity released, you can't use it. And say, for example, if something really bad happened, like the property market just dropped, if the property market dropped, your equity is gone. It's not there anymore. Okay, you can't use it at all. All right. But if the property market, if you release the equity already and the property market dropped, you still have access to the equity. And it's like, okay, why would you wanna use the equity if the property market dropped? Well, maybe you are fine with having a property that's worth less than what you have as a loan, because you want to reinvest that into more property, and you're pretty confident that that property will rebound and grow in value later. So that's why you get your equity released, because if you don't get it released as soon as you can, there's a potential that you might not be able to get access to it. Hopefully this helped. If you guys were struggling to understand what equity is and how it works, hopefully this helped. If not, just write a comment and I can hit you up and do another video to try and explain it a bit more to you. Just subscribe as well if you guys enjoy these videos. See ya. Bye.